Welcome back to the OU Insider YouTube channel. This is Quick Slants. Parker Thune alongside Jesse Crittenden. And Jesse, as we get closer and closer to football season, and it's within sight. Obviously, August fall camp is just on the other side, and then the season kicks off in September. So there's light at the end of the tunnel for football fans, especially OU football fans eager to see their program bounce back in year two under Brent Venables. But one of the things that we've discussed a little bit over the course of the offseason, but that bears a more expanded, or rather yields a more expanded conversation today, I suppose, is the reality that this program, this team is going to need some breakout performers on both sides of the ball in 2023 as you replace some key starters that have moved on. And in general, just as you look to take a step up from a 6-7 season a year ago, that maybe wasn't as bad as that record would indicate, but still by anyone's standard, not up to par at the University of Oklahoma. So you look at both sides of the ball for this team. Who are some guys that you've got a red eye on as guys that can take the step in terms of production or in terms of impact and help lift all boats, as it were, for the Sooners?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do a weekend series kind of, discussing a little bit, I think, what we're going to talk about here. But I think in my mind, the first part is kind of defining what does a breakout season look like. And to me, I think that sort of excludes either first year players or, players who have been around and have been productive for a while. So I'm really looking at maybe some returning guys that didn't see a big role last year, or maybe some transfers who have yet to, did make a big impact at their other programs. So I'm going to start offensively. I'm going to give you three names, and you tell me if these are too obvious or if these if they're bad picks. If you disagree, don't agree, you tell me. The three I picked for offense, I'll start with the more obvious one, but Jalil Farouk, Gavin Sawchuk, and Andrell Anthony. Those are the three players that I've picked. Do you agree, disagree? What do you think?
I think Sawchuk is somebody that's on everybody's short list heading into the 2023 season. I think that's probably the safest bet among breakout performers because, you're replacing a 1,300-yard rusher in Eric Gray. Somebody's going to have to step in and fill the void, and somebody has. You go back decades at Oklahoma, it hasn't really mattered who's been in that backfield. There's always been a next man up mentality, and regardless of who you graduate, who you lose, there's always been a back on the roster or multiple backs. And I think that's the case between Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes that are ready to step in and help carry the load. Now, as far as Farouk, I don't know if I'd really categorize him as a breakout guy just because he already was a starter and had a, cornerstone type of impact for this program a year ago. Is he expected to take a step up in terms of production? Absolutely. But that brings me to Anthony. And I think that's definitely one guy that you can identify as somebody that brings a lot to the offense with his skill set, really flashed throughout spring ball, and based on his production or lack thereof at Michigan, you can safely conclude that the 2023 season, as long as he doesn't succumb to injury or get shuffled down the depth chart, is going to be his most productive as a collegian to date.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And I'll specify what I mean by Farouk. And I know he's not really the traditional definition of what a breakout player is. He had 37 catches last season, 5 touchdowns. Had some big plays. But I think for me, why I think he could be a breakout is, I think he's not only just in line for a step up next season. I think he's in line for a Marvin Mims type role or even better. And I think OU is going to need him to have that. With Marvin Mims gone, with Braden Willis gone, even with Eric Gray gone. Eric Gray caught 33 passes last year. OU needs Jalil Farouk to be like I think they're going to need him to be that rock solid, straightforward number one guy. And I think there were times that last season, I think Jeff Lebby found some creative ways to get him involved, some end arounds and some reverses. He carried the ball 15 times last season, but I think they're going to need him to be a clear cut number one option in this offense. you can look at some young guys that OU is bringing in, and maybe some young guys that are coming back from last year, Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson. I think with what they're losing and what the offense has at wide receiver, they're going to need him to not just be as good as last season. I think they're going to need him to be better. And then with Andrell Anthony, I agree. I think the potential has always been there. I think he had a disappointing couple of seasons at Michigan, but with Marvin Mims gone, I think they need it. OU desperately needs a deep threat. I think that's where Andrell Anthony can succeed. I think they're really going to need both those guys to have big roles next season.
Let me throw a couple more names at you, and both pass catchers. That's the common denominator. But Jaquays Petaway, as he comes in as a true freshman, I think he's got the tools and he's got the skill set to be an instant impact contributor in this Oklahoma offense. And I've kind of said this before. I don't think it's a secret to anybody, but with the speed that Petaway brings to the table, and not just the speed, but the combination of speed and true receiver athleticism. Like he's not just fast from point A to point B. That's an actual wide receiver. You know, you're not talking about a track athlete who moonlights as a football player. And I think there are several guys like that. You know, you think about Gavin Freeman, Brennan Thompson, several guys on that roster that bring speed to the table and that also have developed that wide receiver skill set to the point where they're not just a burner, but they're an all-around threat in an offense. I just think Petaway's got a naturally higher ceiling than anybody else on the roster that's cut from that cloth. There's a reason why he was a top 100 prospect in the country last year, top 15 at the wide receiver position. The guy can go. He's a stud. I would expect he has an impact in the return game, as well as a situational sporadic role in the offense too. The other guy that I want to bring up would be Jason Llewellyn. And that's because Austin Stogner is going to be a workhorse at the tight end position. I think that's pretty well understood. He's easily the guy with the most experience. Caden Helms caught one pass last year as a true freshman. And that one pass combined with Blake Smith's 2 catches during his career at Texas A&M, those 3 receptions between the 2 of them comprise the entirety of the production at the collegiate level for the Oklahoma tight end room outside of Austin Stogner. So Stogner's got a lot on his shoulders, but Llewellyn coming off an off-season injury, he's going to have to get back up to speed quickly, but really liked him in high school. I just think the size, the frame, he's a prototypical tight end. You know, when you think tight end, Jason Llewellyn is the type of player that comes to mind. And I think he's got some similarities to Stogner, maybe not quite as fast, maybe not quite as explosive, but this will be a good opportunity for him to learn under Stogner for a year, get snaps here and there in the offense, I would imagine. But look, come 2024, somebody's going to have to be the starter in that room. Somebody's going to have to seize the bull by the horns. And Llewellyn's got as good a chance as anybody. He just needs to make steps in that direction on the field this fall, and I think he'll be given the opportunity to do so. Let's flip sides to the defensive side.
Now I'll limit this to a couple of names. I think one that's obvious and one that's, I think it's going to depend on how the position group shakes out. But the first obvious one is Jaren Kanak. I mean, I think that's a name everybody's going to have on their list, right? I mean, I think he's a guy that can come in next season and take one of those starting linebacker positions. We saw the impact he had last season. I think that one's pretty obvious. I think it'd be pretty surprising if he doesn't have a bigger role next season. I think the one that's more interesting because OU has added so much depth there during the offseason. My other pick is R. Mason Thomas at defensive end. And I think he's got the tools. He's got the talent. He saw the field a little bit last season. He's one of the guys that stood up the most to me when we talked during spring practices about, I mean, he admitted the game moved really fast, almost too fast for him last season, and that held him back. I think he feels more confident this season. He has the intangibles. He has the tools. I think the only thing is, can he assert himself to the top at a depth chart that's going to have a lot of experienced guys on it? So I know you've been an R. Mason Thomas guy. I think he can have a big impact. I think he's both obvious and not obvious. He's got talent, but he's a young guy with a lot of talent there. I mean, what do you think?
No, I feel like, man, honestly, you kind of stole my thunder with the R. Mason Thomas pick, but no, I'm bullish on the kid, man. And I think if I had to peg who Oklahoma's sack leader is in 2023, I'm pushing all my chips into the R. Mason Thomas pile because his natural ability to just get after the quarterback and maneuver his way around offensive tackle. You saw it in spurts last year. You certainly saw it on his high school film. Yeah, he's a little bit undersized, but to me, man, he's almost like, and I say this hesitantly because it's high praise, but he's almost like a Nick Bonito on steroids, where he's just got that natural pass rush ability, and you see it, and you can foresee that guy playing NFL football. But I think what he has that Benito struggled with was one thing Benito always had an issue with during his time at Oklahoma was he struggled to keep weight on. He was always playing in that 225, 230 range, which admittedly it didn't deter him, but R. Mason Thomas put on 17 pounds between the end of the 2022 season and the beginning of spring ball till he was right around that 240 threshold. And so to carry that kind of good weight and to not have lost a step, and Miguel Chavis said as much, he said he's just as fast and he's bigger. Man, I think that guy's got an immensely high ceiling, and I think you're going to start to see him realize some of that potential in 2023. The cornerback room is interesting to me because obviously Woody Washington is a starter on one side. The battle for the other starting corner position is where things get a little bit dicier. And you've got some quality contenders. Gentry Williams showed some flashes last year. Makari Vickers and Josiah Wagoner, excellent football players who had their moments in spring. Kendall Dolby, junior college All-American. And so I'm not really sure who ends up starting at that second corner spot, but I give the inside track to Gentry Williams, and that is one guy that I can see playing NFL football one day as well. And I know he struggled later on in the latter stages of his high school career with injury, tore that ACL when he was a junior in high school. And so there were some folks worried that he'd be able to regain that same speed and explosiveness that he displayed pre-injury, and he has. I mean, the medical situation that he suffered in spring was scary for a brief moment in time, no doubt about it. But all indications are it has not deterred him in any meaningful way. And if that's a guy that moves into a full-time starting role in 2023, I think he can be expected to produce and lock down his side of the field. If I had to pick a third name, man, I think Reggie Pearson's being somewhat undersold. A lot of talk about Billy Bowman, a lot of talk about Peyton Bowen, understandably. But Reggie Pearson, to me, a guy going into his sixth year of college football, it feels weird that somebody with that much experience isn't getting talked about a whole heck of a lot, but I feel like that's the reality right now for Pearson.
No, I think that is a really good pick. And I think Pearson, I mean, he does have a lot of experience on the field, but I don't know if he's had that one career defining season or that necessarily that one season. I guess the better way to put it is I think there's a world where this season at OU is by far the best one of his career, which I think goes into that breakout kind of category. But I think the overall thing and actually going through the roster and trying to figure out breakout players, I think the thing that has stood out the most to me, and I think you highlighted it, I think there's no better way to look at it than the cornerback room. I think there are so many positions where the coaching staff is going to have to make a decision. Do you go with the more experienced guy that has more playing time on the field, or do you go with maybe some of the younger guys who haven't proven it on the field, but the potential is there, the upside is there? We saw this coaching staff lean more towards experience last year, I think understandably. I think this year that's going to be a tougher thing to lean on in every case. And I think there's going to be so many young guys at a lot of these positions who make a case. I think cornerback and safety, I think, are going to be two of those rooms where that dilemma may be the hardest one to figure out.
We're something like, 10 weeks away from football in Oklahoma? So we're getting close, folks. Hang in there. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Once again, if you're not following along with our season preview series on this channel, would highly recommend that you check it out. We just broke down Texas, so that was a fun one, and that kind of marks the halfway point of the series. Got 6 more games to preview in depth and in detail. So follow along with this channel. The best way to do it is hit that subscribe button. If you want all the juicy insider information on OU football and recruiting, head over to OUinsider.com, snag a subscription. It'll cost you $8 a month. That's nothing for what you're going to get, and all of the goods that you're going to get on the message boards and elsewhere every single day of the week, every single day of the year from Jesse and myself and Brandon Drum. So until we see you again, everybody take care. This is the OU Insider YouTube channel. This is Quick Slants. Take it easy.